Maybe because it's a simple idea, so they love it. Would that be a true statement? 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay. So this word is, what would we normally put in place of that word is? An equal sign. And so when you see the word is, very oftentimes, you can replace that word is with an equal sign. In other words, you're telling us that the thing over on this side of the equal sign is equal to the thing on this side. So he's giving us a definition. He's giving us a definition of what happiness is. So happiness is when what you think, what you say, and then what you do are in harmony. So giving us, so from the example that Ariana gave us, so someone gives you a gift, let's say some clothes aren't your style, like some knitted socks, but you say, oh, thank you, you appreciate it. So what you're thinking is, I'm never going to wear these. These are just going to go in my drawer, they're going to take up space. But you say, oh, thank you. And then you smile like, wow, I'm going to wear these every day. Those are not in harmony. There's an incongruency between those three things.
They don't align.
Exactly, exactly. And so when these things don't align, they're kind of askew, and then you're trying to like make things fit that don't really fit. And that's a lot of life, man. This is a lot of what happens with people when they end up miserable, because they're trying to fit. Like, let's say, for example, there's something that they want in life, or better yet, there's something that they don't want in life. Like, let's say a lot of people don't want to go to college, but they feel like they're pressured to go. So then they go. So they go ahead and they do it. And then they may even say, like, you know what, I'll give it my best try. I'll give it my best try. And then that turns out to be a lie. Because you weren't really thinking about giving it your best try. You were thinking about, I'm just going to go so people will leave me alone. And so these things are not in alignment. Or better yet, I guess another way, you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to go. Because I think I really need to get an education. And you might be thinking that, you might be saying that, but then, when the party comes, you do something very differently. And so these things just aren't in alignment. We've talked before about this disagreement between the persona and the shadow, and how when these two things battle it out, there's a tendency for us to develop certain neuroses, certain psychological conditions, even basically anxiety, stress, depression, because we're not working kind of in alignment. It's like if you're walking, good example, a friend of mine has scoliosis, which I didn't realize she had scoliosis. I didn't know anybody had scoliosis anymore. I thought that was like a 19th century thing, but apparently people have scoliosis. As I'm saying that right now, some of you are looking at me like you have scoliosis. I apologize, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But she's got this, it's weird because she says that her spine's all crooked. But I look at her, she like stands normally, she looks normally, but I guess it's so bad that she would have to have it corrected by surgery, and they're not even sure that necessarily they even could do that. I guess it's kind of like that, like where your whole body is not in alignment, versus if your whole structure kind of is sturdy and in alignment, you're strong. Like, I guess the way of thinking about it is, if you go to a person and have them stand, and even if you're like way bigger and way heavier than them, have them just stand normally, and then put your hands on their shoulders, and then like put all your weight down, and then the person will just stand there, they won't move. And you can even ask them like, how much strength did you use to stand up? They won't have used much strength at all, even if you're way heavier than them. It won't, you won't be tipping them over. Why? Because their whole structure is in alignment. Now, if you have the person stand there, same idea, and just twist their shoulders a little bit, almost imperceptibly, so that their shoulder goes in one direction, and then you can just use a couple fingers and you can push them over, go that way, whichever way that they're kind of leaning towards. And again, it doesn't have to be like a big leaning towards. It can just be something like a little bit. Why? Because in the first case, their whole body is in alignment, and so they're strong, they're sturdy, they're not going anywhere. If they are off just a little bit, then it's easy to knock them askew. You think of it this way, that when what you say, what you think, and what you do in harmony, you're standing, you're strong, you're stable, you're in the world. But when you kind of think something a little bit different from what you're saying and doing, it's easy to kind of topple you and, I guess, push you into chaos. And so, this is hard to do, though. This is hard to do. Because I wonder how often there's a thing that you think, and then there's a thing that you say, and then when you do it, you get a lot of grief over it. Maybe these things are not necessarily socially acceptable, or maybe they're acceptable within your family, but they are acceptable in society, or whatever, any context. Well then, you have a lot of people who are giving you grief over it. You might think like, that's happiness? That's what it feels like to do the right, like if you're doing the right thing. And that's what happiness feels like? And he would say, yeah, happiness is not necessarily a feeling of like, everything is great and I'm accepted everywhere. Happiness, he's saying, is this thing right here. This is the definition for it. And so if we use that definition, my goodness, I think, well, how many of us are happy going by that definition? How many of us do think and say and do things that are in alignment, whatever they are? How many of us just kind of say, like we think something, but then we say and do something completely opposite just to get along with people? Or how often it's the other way around? We'll say things that we do believe, and then we'll think things, but then we'll act contrarily. So it's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult test, actually, to go through for most people. There really isn't much more than that. Because I didn't have much to say about it. It's just a lot to think about, like when you're walking through life every day, asking yourself how often you are doing this. And it's really uncomfortable because I think that, well, I know that a lot of people end up having to kind of like, tweak this thinking thing because maybe they're afraid to say something or they're afraid to do something. So therefore they have to like tweak the thing that they're thinking and almost like convince themselves, no, I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, that's right. And you don't really believe it, but you're forcing yourself to think that. Well, once again, now you're living a life that's not congruent. You've tipped your shoulders just a little bit. So it's very difficult now for you to be stable. So, alignment.
Do you have any examples? Like any personal examples?
Of those things?
Like
oh, yeah.
for you.
Oh, yeah. Others?
Can you give us an example?
Okay.
It doesn't have to be like...
Doesn't have to be what? True?
No.
Yeah, there's a few. The good news is that there are fewer and fewer and fewer of them as the years go, as time goes on. Yeah, there's way fewer of those things. I guess right just now I gave you an example. Like I said before that, yeah, during class I won't tell you what I think about things. I'll tell you what Gandhi thinks about things. And if you think that what I'm telling you is something that I believe, like about any of this stuff, then you might be missing something. It might be what I think about it. It might not be what I think about it. But if I do my job well, then you won't know what I actually think about any of these things. People like say things like, oh, I don't ask anything too personal. I'll answer anything. If it's before class, if it's after class, if it's not during class, I'll answer anything. I'm not shy about that kind of stuff. I have no problem saying things. But here in the context of what I do here, a lot of the things that I say here are contrary to the things that I think. But they are in alignment with the things that I do. In other words, what I might be thinking here is, Gandhi's full of crap. For happiness, like I made that comment before we started, when he wasn't busy sexually harassing 12-year-olds, this is what he said. And then we're like, oh, like I said before, like John Lennon, when he wasn't, when he took a break from his busy wife-beating schedule, he wrote Imagine. Michael Jackson, when he wasn't, when he was finally done molesting children, he wrote Smooth Criminal. And we'll cringe at stuff like that. But it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that all these people are imperfect in these ways. Michael Jackson, by the way, probably. We don't know that that's certain. The guy was just really odd. And so when you ask a guy like that, like for example, when he was asked, did you sleep in the bed with children? And he said, yes. There was no like hedging, like, I mean, we didn't sleep. We were, he wasn't trying to talk his way out of it at all. He just go, did you sleep in the bed with children? I did. Well, don't you think that's weird? No. And most of us look at that and we're like, oh my God, how could you not think that that's weird? Well, because if you look at how the guy grew up, and you looked at the whole rest of his life, you could sit there and say, I could see why he would think that that's not so strange. 99% of the people in the world would think that that's strange. Gandhi wouldn't, but 99% of the people in the world would think that that's strange, to sleep in a bed with children. But for Michael Jackson, then again, by the way, 99% of us would also think it's strange to build a Disneyland replica in Malibu and live there. And most of us would also think it's strange to like have chimps and to keep. Oh, what was it? He had. I think it was said that he had the Elephant Man. This guy who had degenerative disease, a skeleton, old 19th century. It was said that he actually owned that guy's skeleton and kept it. That's a weird thing too for most people to think. So Michael Jackson does weird things. Why? Well, because creative people are eccentric and do weird things. And this is why, like I've said, like if you're in love with someone or if you like someone who's a poet, well, run. And if you like someone who's a poet and a musician, you run as fast as you possibly can away. It's not that the person is necessarily going to do strange things on purpose. That's just what they do. That's just what they do. And so he didn't. I don't know that Michael Jackson necessarily thought it was strange that he was doing the things that he was doing, unless, of course, he was molesting children, in which case he would have had to have known that that was wrong, because if he was doing it, he tried really hard to hide that fact. But everything else, you sit there and go like, well, he didn't hide any of those things. These things were in alignment for him. Yeah. But where was I going with that? This has been a strange week. It's only Tuesday. I don't lose my train of thought. That's weird. There was a reason I brought that up. With Gandhi and Jack. This will not make it into YouTube. I'm going to put something at the bottom of the screen saying, I said some brilliant things the world's not ready for just yet.
It's too powerful.
It's too advanced for the world to hear.
Is it because you said that, like, what you think about the quotes, is it always what you say what you think?
And it was going off of that. I should keep moving my hands around, pretending like what I'm saying, because when it fast forwards on the video, I can't just be standing like an idiot, right? I have to be talking like an idiot.
Just say you're modeling.
Oh, don't believe that. Well, I can say that anyway, that's the case. Oh, well, yeah. I guess I take that very seriously with regards to not telling you guys what I think, because most of you, I think, would be surprised by what I think in real life. At least that's the feedback I get from people. Like, there was something I said a few weeks ago that afterwards I stopped recording and I said, I don't believe a word of what I just said. And then so you were saying, but you said it like you believed it very passionately. Yeah, because that's what somebody who believed that would say. You know, with regards to Gandhi, you know, I don't. He's wrong about this, but he's not wrong by much, because what I'm saying is that he's redefining what this idea of happiness. He's equating happiness with virtue, and so so virtue is when you do all these things, you keep them in alignment, but you're not going to be joyful and happy in the way that we think of it. In other words, you're not going to have a positive sentiment. There's something that's really valuable. There's something that's very powerful inside of you when what you say, do, and think are in alignment. But I think that these kinds of things are very dangerous. It's like when you go to a person who's down, who's having a terrible time of life, and then you tell them, you know what would change your life? What? Jesus. That would change your life. You come to Jesus, he will give you love, peace, joy, happiness, contentment, fulfillment. All of your troubles will be gone, and you will be a happy, joyous personality. And the guy's like, that's a pretty good deal. And then someone converts to their religion, and then a week later they get fired from their job, and their wife leaves them. And they're like, wait a second, you promised me happiness, joy, contentment, fulfillment, and happy. But that's not what I got. And then all of a sudden, now the person who was kind of skeptical about this whole religious thing in the first place is now angry about this whole religious thing. That person will probably never return to religion again in their life. For better or worse, I'm just saying that person will probably never do it. Why? Because you sold them a false bill of goods. So when Gandhi comes along and says, this is happiness, and then you're like, really? So if I just say what I think and do, and I put these things in alignment, well then I'm going to be happy? Yeah. And then someone comes along and says something controversial, I don't know. we should kill all old people and take their social security checks. Well, you disagree with that? Well, never mind then. I guess I'm not so happy because now y'all are staring at me and want to throw eggs at me. It's like, I thought if I said what I really think and then I did it, you saying you killed a person for their social security check? Yes, I killed someone for the social security check, and now not only am I hated, but now I'm thrown in jail. Do you think I sit in jail and I'm like, this is home? No, I don't know that I can sit there and say I'm really happy, but there's a contentment that you can feel when these things are all in alignment. And again, I think that the problem is that once you do all these things and you don't get that, you're very unlikely to do these things in the future. In fact, I think it's counterproductive to this stuff. Because now when you're going to be you're not going to say the things that you think. And then that's going to mess you up even worse, because you'll be afraid to say the things and forget doing things that they do. And by the way, if you do these things, you're not going to say them, because then you don't want to make public the things that you do. You're going to hide them. And it becomes this whole process of like cat and mouse, of having to hide who you are and hide from society. You know? You have to eliminate this from the equation. This is absolutely things that you should do. There are things in life, like I said, that there's, let me think, like there's certain political positions. If you hold them, you hold them. If you think them, then you should say them, and you should act on them, regardless of where you are. If you're in a heavily conservative place and you're a Democrat, you should. That's what you think. That's what you should say. That's what you should do. If you're a conservative and you're a very democratic place, what you think is what you should say and do. And you might think that, well, yeah, but then people are going to. That's the thing. If you get rid of this happiness thing out of it, and you say it's the right thing, it's the virtuous thing, it's the moral thing. Well, then there you go. And that's enough of a reward, because then you can understand what goes along with that is not necessarily happiness, but contentment. In other words, you're okay with what you're getting out of it. You're okay with, I don't want to say the persecution, but it's not that deep. But you're okay with, having people flip you off in traffic because of your bumper stickers or whatever it is that you're doing. Or you're okay with people, yelling at you because of your lawn sign or whatever. I hope that makes sense, that we sell a false bill of goods. It's almost like if I told you guys, hey, you guys should go to college. Why? Because if you go to college, you're going to be able to get a great job, a wonderful future, secure. You're going to get, you'll get married, you'll have a house, white picket fence, 2.5 children. It's going to be wonderful. You're going to love it.
2.5 children?
Yeah, that's the average, so.
One of them comes out disabled?
Wow, you think disabled people are half a person? Wow.
Are we not joking? Anymore?
We don't joke in this class at all. We're very serious here.
Sorry, guys.
Jeez.
Don't answer me.
Yeah, what do you call a handicapped person? Names. What did the kid with no hands get for Christmas?
Stop.
I don't know. He hasn't opened his presents yet. I should stop picking on handicapped people. What do orphans get for Christmas? Lonely.
Oh my god.
I know. This is all Dulce's fault. She opened it.
I think it's just following your footsteps.
Oh no. I've told you how many times I am not a role model. I think I've proven this many times. Any of you could have said no right there, but it's okay. It's good. You're wise. You're smart. The point there is that there are lots of things that kind of fall into this. But happiness, if the point of life was to be comfortable, if the point of life was to just be happy and comfortable, we would just lay around drunk in bed all day. But we all realize there's far more to life than that. We reckon, what was the second quote of the whole school year? I'm going to pretend like, second was from Charles Bourdieu, and he said, you should be drunk in life. Whether it's with wine, with poetry, with virtue, but be drunk. He's not saying we should lay around and be alcoholics. He's saying that we should find something in life and indulge in that thing in the same way that an alcoholic does, recklessly, to the point that hopefully what we pursue is something that's really good, virtue, something that's very positive. Hopefully what we pursue is not something that's self-destructive. But having said that, there's something to self-destructive behavior. Don't a lot of great stories come from it? Like I say, I can resist everything. I have wonderful self-control. I can resist everything. accept temptation. Because that's where the best stories come from. But I wouldn't recommend it to most people. Although getting into hot water is good sometimes. It keeps you clean, if you remember that one as well. But yeah, this is, sorry, so that's my point. I don't agree with this quote whatsoever. I think that that word, it turns us off from doing virtuous action. And then happiness is very different from virtuous action. Doing the right thing is the right thing, not because it makes you feel good. And of course, the things that make us feel good are oftentimes the things that lead us headlong into harm. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Do you know why I make those jokes about Gandhi? Anybody know what he used to do? In order to test, he would say in order to test his self-control, he would sleep in beds. I was being generous by saying 12-year-olds. They're normally like 8, 9-year-olds, prepubescent girls. He would sleep naked in bed with naked prepubescent girls as a way of testing his self-control, to prove that he could control himself. Right. That's what always struck me. Like, if you put a pile of shit in front of me and said, we're going to test your self-control scale and don't eat that, that's not really a test of self-control. It's more of like, just whatever, just take it away. You know, have I proved it yet? If that kind of a thing is a test to you, then there's a problem there. I mean, if you like to eat shit, right? Yeah, if being naked in bed with children is a test to you, that means something, yes?
I thought he was like world peace.
Oh, he was world peace, but, you know, like Martin Luther King Jr., he was world peace as well, but the guy had illegitimate children with lots of mistresses all over the place. And he was a reverend. People are imperfect. People make mistakes. People screw up. Everyone's human. The problem is that we forget that. And there used to be a thing back when Gandhi was around. Why don't I have this 1848?
We
It's
were
19
talking about it.
That's 1948.
I was trying
Sorry.
to tell you, but you were making your coffee.
Oh, does it smell different? It's a new coffee. I was waiting for you to say something, but I'm terrible at surprises, so I have to ask. Yeah. Wow, this poor guy died before he was born. There's a statement there. Oh. Wow. Yeah. Wow. But these characters are so interesting to me because you have guys like for example Martin Luther King Jr. You know, he had a dream, and then he had a head wound. But the reason that he was able to be so peaceful and loving and kind was because he would stand there and say, "We're going to do it with peace." And that's because behind him he had Malcolm X with a rifle saying, "No, we're going to kill everyone." And then the world kind of was like, let's see, we have a choice. We've got Malcolm X or we've got Martin Luther King Jr. Let's go with King Jr. But one of the big reasons that he was successful was because you had that threat of violence on the alternative. Gandhi was like this as well. Gandhi was very peaceful. He was very much into civil disobedience and passive resistance. But there were other militants who were operating at the time as well who wanted to just kill all the British who were in India. But anyway, but if you look at what he wrote and what he said, there's a big difference between what he said and what he did, interestingly enough. But that doesn't mean that what he said was therefore wrong. It's right. Just because we can't live up to certain things doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to. You know, we have pictures of people on our walls oftentimes, and we try to emulate them, but we try to emulate the good parts of them. You know, you guys ever go to a restaurant and you get, I don't know, anybody go to In-N-Out and you get your cheeseburger without onions? Yeah, you can take your people like your cheeseburgers. You can sit there and go, Gandhi, peace and love. You know, or you can spend your whole life trying to find someone who fits perfectly with your ideals. And by the way, you're never going to find someone who fits perfectly with your ideals. In fact, where's the last place you're going to find someone who fits perfectly with your ideals? In the mirror. Yeah. In fact, because we get those ideals from other places. And so if you're looking at somebody who's going to fall short all the time, well, that's going to be you, because you're going to fall short, and you're going to be there for every single time you fall short. Of all the terrible things that Gandhi did, we only know about a few of them. And by the way, keep in mind, he told people he did that.
Oh.
Right. So, and why? He didn't think that was strange. And culturally, where he was at the time, they didn't think that was super strange. People, the reason that you would tell someone something is because you think that the whole audience is going to agree with you. Like if I said to you guys, so we should kill people for their social security checks, right? And then you guys all look at me like, what the hell did you say? I'm like, ooh, wrong audience. Maybe I shouldn't have said that to this audience. When Gandhi says something like that, and I'm sure that somewhere there's an audience that would hear that and just be like, yeah, he's right about that. And so if I'm talking to that audience, but then another audience hears it, that's why, like I said, we have to be charitable with people, man, because times change, ideas change, and it's incredibly arrogant of us to come along today in 2020 and say that we have all of the moral answers, that we have the answers to all of life's moral questions. Of course, again, we've never studied ethics, we've never really studied morality, we've never really thought about these issues for very long at all, but we're absolutely damn convinced that we know better than people who have studied it or old people who have lived through it. We should be very careful. We might have the answers today. We might. But there's a really good chance that we don't also, because every generation that's come before us thought that they had the right answers. And the only reason that we are where we are today is because of those generations that came before us, and we stand on their shoulders. It was just like I guess year before last, when all the riots all over the country, riots and protests, pair them up, were happening. I saw people on my Instagram timeline saying, we're the first generation to stand up against police brutality. Every generation allowed this to go on. And I'm like, I was in the streets with 2 different riots when I was younger than the people who were posting these things. I've been shot up by cops with rubber bullets because we were out there protesting police violence. Ironic, right? Get shot with a rubber bullet because you're protesting police violence. And I was there in the streets, and it's not hard to find. You go to YouTube and you can watch videos of it. There are videos on YouTube that I imagine if you could zoom in, and if you could zoom in close enough, you'd see 16-year-old me running around in there. But then people come along, and because they have no understanding of history, they think that their mindset that they have is entirely their own. They have no conception that the mindset that they have is based on the people who came before them, for better or worse. And that's our task, is to figure that out, to sort that out, so that we don't make the same mistakes, but we can capitalize on the good things. So we can toss the onions out of the cheeseburger and eat the cheeseburger. It's not that hard. You can go on YouTube and you can watch the videos of all these kinds of things. And by the way, my generation wasn't the first one either. That's the discouraging thing. Because there were generations before mine and after mine. And then, well, I guess it would be this one. And then I'll ask you, what changed? All these protests, all these riots, all these things that happened. We stood in the street, we waved placards. What's changed? Nothing. And so what's going to happen is that your kids may come along someday, or your grandkids may come along someday, if they're still allowed to, and they're going to protest, if they're still allowed to, and say things like, we're the first generation to ever protest the police state. It's like, no, the reason you're protesting the police state is because the previous generations, mine included, failed to follow through with the changes. So maybe this would be the first generation. What could have been said was, we're the first generation that's going to follow through with these changes and make sure they happen. Didn't turn out that way, though. In fact, it went away so fast. Within a year, it went away. There was a Ukraine somewhere, right? There was a crane flying someplace. And then we got distracted. Yeah. And then that virus thing, too. So, I'll ask again. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques. Need to put those away.